and whatever I see is smiling at me. Love is who I am. Hello there, beloved Ascension pioneers, and welcome to this beautiful solstice update and message from the divine, from spirit, together with me. So if you've been following the latest energy and you've been feeling it in your own body, you've been feeling that there was an immense upsurge of light happening. So up until the solstice point, which concurred with the full moon in Sagittarius, which was the second double moon in that sign, which really wanted to set us free. So as you know, the Sagittarius is the archetype of the archer, of that liberated being who's seeking new philosophies, new adventures, new ways of being. And for those of us on the path of ascension, this really concurs with the awakening to our true sovereign nature, who we are, to kind of take back our divine authority, to not just live from our space of love and light, but also physical boundaries, how we communicate them as physical beings who are of service to all, which is the love we give and receive as payment, in a way, as energy exchange, but also as humans, as human counterparts that are going through this. And no matter how much love quotient we embody, we also have physical needs to tend to. So we were being taught and shown the way of self-love and how to prioritize for the self and how to accept the gifts as the physical offers them as well, gifts for the self, which kind of shows us our boundaries. And sometimes we need to have them intact, especially when we're dealing with people who are not always speaking the love light language. And sometimes we really need to be in that integral embodiment of who we are as the ambassador of true love, which is not just the love and light movement and everything's good and the higher perspective, but also the embodiment of that love of full integrity and that respect that we have for us in the bigger picture. So today, in this video, I wanted to kind of speak about some of the unfoldings as of the late that we're probably all experiencing in our own way. So the first thing I really want to talk about is that return of true love, and what does it mean? Because in a way, I've shared with you that this third wave of our ascension that we will integrate will be the return of that divine reunion for us, as in terms of inner male and female dynamics in balanced polarity kind of coming up front for us to see and witness, but also to have that as a physical experience. So a lot of beings on this planet who've been assigning or ascribing to certain roles, whether these roles were having to deal with being a victim, a rebel, a caretaker, overly mothering being, all these labels and roles, often they were familiar in a way. What I mean also coming through our genetic lineage, that we've been incorporating them as we've come and entered these bodies. Imagine having a high consciousness, but then coming in this physical vessel that also has things. So we all needed to grow through these growing pains and through these experiences and things. So what it feels like is that the light of this year's solstice is really a reset point for that personal liberation to truly live as the extension of that divine love in human form. So that third wave, that, like I said, it concurs and it resonates with that divine reunion in the physical, because we've all had reunions in our spirit when we've kind of merged with the essence or an ideal or a higher expectancy of that, what reunion represents for us. And some people call it the twin flame or the merging, or, you know, we've often seen people wanting that as a physical experience with another, but because our light body merge hasn't really been intact, we haven't done the work in the physical, these half interstaging unions, they did not fully mirror our illumined state of being. So I will talk about that and that beloved templating, and actually how can we prepare in the physical for that and the tantric union in the next video. But here I just want to kind of put it out there that it is a part of our inner, next evolving cycle, because we were growing through a lot of these, what we call the growing pains, but now we're moving into the cycle when I I've shared this in one of my recent Ascension updates. You can read all of my Ascension updates on my page, Ascension Pioneers. And the recent update spoke about, when Spirit showed me that a lot of us are now moving through this phase when our record memory, which is our cellular remembrance, is being totally renewed and restored, because a lot of us, like I said, we still ascribed to something that is a part of our cellular memory. So even though our consciousness is intact and we have very high presence and awareness through that knowing, we need a physical experience that will reflect to us where this record memory is still playing from the, let's call it the banks of memory, like a living library, that we're kind of tapping into the multitudes of the experiences, but not all of them really were yet fully representing that high ideal, that high spirit that we kind of feel and we're connected to. Because a lot of people say, well, only a few privileged ones can really connect to their source. So in today's message, I want to talk about what that merging and blending and blossoming into that true love truly is for us. And I will step aside and let Spirit speak the way it spoke through me today on my run when I was really downloading all of this, what this means for us, because I've witnessed this almost like in many beings I connected to, this first wave of remembering, kind of like it caused a lot of people to go into those modes of wow, true love, to inflame, and a lot of them got really excited. But what I've noticed then is this curve, right? The growing curve. A lot of people were kind of giving up, or they were saying, oh, I no longer believe in this. And I've met a lot of people with beautiful hearts that said, oh, I'm not sure if true love even exists anymore. It's because a part of us still did not experience this on the outside, as in the outside mirror, because we had to go through those growing pains, because we had to go through the experience to, we can't dissolve the old record memory templates without first understanding them and why they were there in the first place and having that pure compassion for them. So the experiences that we're mirroring these aspects of us so far, and a lot of us have been receiving this as a data gathering for the greater collective of our oversoul group. So today will be a lot of talking of the group soul and the parent soul complex in the Spirit message. But I want to say that the return to that true love cannot occur without that returning to ourselves. So a lot of beings are now being called back to that, to the purity of what they once awakened within them. And I've met some people who, let's say, that had this beautiful memory, it came directly from their vertical selves and how they connected to that aspect of them that remembers that true love. But then life took them maybe a different way or through different course of events, and they had experiences that often led them to think, oh my gosh, what if life isn't like this? And a lot of them experienced some pain or trauma. And because of that, a lot of people now tend to go again. They only want to move up with the light, but this is not where our true ascension, physical resurrection is taking us, because we need to, like I said, the old record memory needs to dissolve so that we can actually come as pure conduits embodying the Merkaba, which is the threefold stage of our physical self, the soul self, and then our spirit, so the celestial body of our spirit. I will talk about that in the union video. But in this video, I just want to touch that briefly, that the return to true love can really occur when we, not just energetically or through our knowledge, connect to that, but that we start to translate this into every aspect of our experience. So those of us who've been kind of on the way of frontiering, showing the way, illuminating that for others, we've been having the knowledge, we've been shared through our spirit, the understanding of why and how this is happening, and how this actually served us. It wasn't meant to disappoint us. It wasn't meant for us to have a different experience to what we truly deserve as ascending beings, so that it is our direct match in its living life form. But it served as a preparatory gateway for this record memory to be rebalanced and renewed, so that our new selves can actually start really, it's almost like they're willing to jump in our bodies now fully. It's been like a preparatory stage for aspects and aspects and aspects, and now it feels like a bigger aspect of us wants to jump in. We kind of feel that in alignment with, oh, we say, what's a new energy wave coming, or this is coming. But when we feel it in our own body, it's different when we say, oh, it's happening collectively, we're going through these frequencies, Earth is experiencing this and that, or such and such, and there's a lot of channelings and all of that. But we're actually, when we're experiencing this on our own soul level. We will feel it in our bodies. That's the difference. And the feeling is actually our own soul aspects, like jumping in, and these bigger new templating selves that we've been kind of like, it's almost like if you imagine you're creating the vision first of your new self. You have a vision board and you're putting it there, and once it's complete, you just know it and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to descend that back into form. And I've been talking about ascension, descension for such a long time now, because this is truly what's been happening. So the thing is that a lot of people still don't have an understanding why this is happening. And I'm sharing this for those of you who are already at the verge of that understanding. You've met your edge, and the edge is telling you, look, this is not all how it looks. So the return to true love is, like I said, it begins with us. It begins with us becoming our own beloved. Remembering what it is to be our own cosmic beloved. And I have a beautiful course on the cosmic beloved, which is how you activate through your physical relationships and the relationship you've always had with yourself in your physical form, but also your different higher selves and your spirit attunement, and how you can embody this. Because the goal of physical ascension, which isn't really a goal, and yet it is, it needs to be a steady devotion. I've shared with you this before, that you can have all the knowledge in the world, but without devotion, there's nothing. Nothing happens. Your knowledge stays put like here, and your physical human does not necessarily reflect your higher self-consciousness. You might have a huge consciousness, but the mastery lies in you attaining that. So us walking this path means that we've had to ready our physical vessels, our vehicles, and its preparatory stages to now be ready to embody all of that and to start living that essence of the fifth density, which is pure joy and creativity and freedom of being, and community and cooperation. There's a lot of connotations there. So in that video of union, I'll address that further, but in this video, I want to give you something that Spirit shared this with me today after having this come through very strongly recently, and I've been talking to my sister of light about this. And for a great understanding what's behind all of this and the whole ascension process, I will now kind of step aside and translate this through the words of Spirit that often come through me as when I'm doing my work, or even just, just being myself. It's what I do. And I have to say that in the preview of what I'll be talking about, what came through Spirit, this deals with the actual act of ascension. So if you imagine the dynamics of the soul and the soul clusters and the soul group and the soul overgroup, so the oversoul and the head oversoul and so on and so forth, leading up until your I am monadic presence. So when we've been looking for that source for so long outside of us, or we've been looking for a certain messiah or a guru to represent that source, like a clear reflection for us, because we're not there yet, right? We cannot be that. The thing is that even in the Bible and the different scriptures, when they've been referring to certain people coming back, or their masters, or their demigods in a way, or greater galactic beings, a lot of the mind, they did not yet have the knowledge and the understanding, misplaced that for an actual true archetypal longing, because the true longing is for the reunion of the soul once it's ready to ascend into its greater cluster. That doesn't mean the soul loses its individuality. It simply means that the soul is ready to merge with its bigger oversoul grouping complex. There's so much more about this in Celebrate Kelly's books. He writes that, for me, up until this point, what I've witnessed outside is to the most alignment, and it's a basic understanding for every initiative spirit to understand the soul levels and the soul groupings and the greater soul complex, and what ascension truly is in its basic form. Because a lot of us tend to misplace the word ascension as in terms of just lifting the vibration with the actual soul ascension, when the soul has entered the physical wheel of ascension rather than reincarnation, and the soul starts to expand in a different way. The whole mechanics changes because the soul re-enters its greater presence. And we've had masters showing this way before. So one of these initiates was Joshua. Of course, we know him and how his story goes, but this story mostly was falsified by the religion. In truth, he set the foundation for those who would be ascending when the soul groups would be ready to ascend, these soul clusters, because like I've said, we've had these templates, we've had this shown as representatives to us, but we didn't always have a full understanding. So he showed the way. He made this first, entering through the channel of death, which needed to be his initiation as well, to clear the pathway for those who would follow. And the thing is that a lot of us, in plain language, we've misplaced what that truly means. So because a lot of souls now with the mass ascending wave are ready, we're doing now in mass this thing, called Ascension. This doesn't mean now everybody is ascending in its true resurrection form. Everyone will have an experience of being uplifted in vibration. Even the people who now you say they're experiencing the most density, they're the most asleep, they will also have, in a way, ascension happening for them. That's the different kind of word, because like I said, ascension can be a word used in many different terms. You're ascending, so you're lifting off, you're raising the frequency, not necessarily denotes physical resurrection, which is what Joshua was showing us back then. But what he did still at that time, because the vibration was still of the planet and of the physical vessels, was not to the maximum ready to hold the potential without needing to die to ascend. He had to clear that pathway, because in the grand scheme of things, it was already familiar and was kind of known and understood that when the wave comes and when this photonic light comes from the galactic core, these groupings will be ready to do that work. So every one of ours, our missions, in a way, they're multi-oriented, they're multi-dimensional. Even for me, I don't have just one mission. On different levels of my being and attunement, I serve within a different nature, if that makes sense. So same goes for everyone, but it's always to the maximum capability of your soul's evolution. You can't go beyond what your soul has not yet learned and incorporated in its own individualized presence. But the soul, like I said, also exists within a greater soul complex and cluster where there's greater knowledge and understanding, and that's when people channel, sometimes they go to connect to these other parts of their soul, the soul complex, or they connect to different beings like guides who are not necessarily of their lineage, but they might be of the soul, a similar soul group. I can't explain this, it's very hard to explain it with words, but these guides are, in a way, they might be a few steps ahead of them, and they're showing them how this is done, but they're not of the direct soul, direct ascension, if you know what I mean, direct lineage. So the thing is that in the soul awareness, once we shift to soul evolution awareness and then to what's happening is evolution of our bodies, these two processes are kind of meeting halfway, if you know what I mean. So for us to have a knowledge of what's really happening, we have to have some of the basics that need to be understood at first. Otherwise, we just can't do this. We can't just go to this extreme knowledge without really serving our basics. So that is why for eons and eons of time, we really needed to cover the ground and develop the human body to the degree that it was available to hold that amount of light again. It was already able to hold a great amount of light, but how we did that, we uplifted this with the Star-Seeded project, which is many souls coming, becoming, and serving as hybrids. The consciousness was different. It was not earthly consciousness, but the bodies were still human. So there was a merge taking place in this experiment, called the Grand Experiment in a way. It kind of served to prepare this, and even the lineage, the soul, the bloodline that Jesus and Mary at that time, Mary Magdalene, created, also served to kind of host these more evolved beings that would later follow. And this is now the 2,000 years later. And see how sometimes these projects are much grander and much more lengthy in time as we perceive them to be. So when these certain soul groupings will be ready with this massive wave incoming, it was already known, it was decided through our soul's directive and the understanding where we originally came from. This initiative comes forth, and we had a knowing when that would be. And I'll share later with the spirit part what this means for us. But for me, in my personal journey, how I started to discover that this is my mission, to call back for these souls. First of all, I had dreams showing me that. I had dreams showing me that I was pulling up a group of souls, and I was shown that there's only a particular group, and they said, well, it's not for everyone. You're not for everyone, although my mission is multi-layered, so you're also streaming forth the rays of light on what you're doing. The emanations extend further out. Almost like when you look at the nature of Jeshua's purpose, it was so multifaceted, you can't just direct it to one thing. So it left marks also on those who weren't, in a way, directly involved with what he was doing. Of course, a lot of them misplaced what he was truly to do, but still, it caused them to go in modes that without that, they maybe wouldn't even start thinking about. So when we say, oh, you know, these religions have, in a way, preconceived idea about someone of their lineage coming and returning to call them back. Some people say, well, Yahweh would return, or some people say this, you know, or Quetzalcoatl, or how is it called? You know, these different peoples all have different names for the same thing, but we as humans, we've placed this by saying, wow, the great one Lord would return and gather all the people back together. Even when you look at the nature of different tribes back then, they were also the descendants of certain lineages, and their own messiahs were actually these soul parts, the mother parts, calling them back and showing them. So why there's such a strong link through different terminologies, even in different religions, with a particular specific type of guru or being, or how should I say it, certain entity of a greater proportion, it's because that's been misplaced by knowing that at your time you would be called back, you would be summoned back to the remembrance, like I said, of that true nature of where you really originated from, and the truth that is our I am presence. So with this in mind, this initiative, this directive creates what is needed for that to take place, and each of those groups would experience that differently. So in my case, when I kind of, you know, reconnect with certain people, and I was told from the beginning when I started doing my channel and my work that these people would find me, that I don't have to do anything but just put the information knowledge out, because I'm the recipient, the mother part of the whole picture for that particular group, and then all I need to do is put that out, although others would also come, and each one getting what they need and their certain evolution. But the prime purpose of you coming back, reclaiming that parts, which are actually just different extensions of you, of the greater soul complex. So if you've studied this before, or you've read Sal's material before, you understand that it's just very simple when you look at it like that. The nature of divine creation is, it's how it's formed, you know. Things go out and further out and spread out and create these different variables and extensions of its original creatrix that goes out and imprints upon these different structures in creation. So I know I'm using a little bit of ET language, but I'm trying to do my best because these things are very, when we receive them, those of us who have this knowledge, we just receive them, and it's hard to kind of put them in words. And I always ask, you know, try to give me the words that I can understand and use in the videos to explain, but I'm always shown that those who need to have that understanding would, no matter the language, because the energy transfers as well. And sometimes the language is more encoded, and it's not meant for everyone to understand it at that time, because that's how it needs to be. So I trust what comes through is the best course in nature. So with this in mind, when I encountered a few people, I've noticed the pattern. And there were a few people that have shared the same soul group name. They said, oh, I've heard that my soul name is this. And I think I've encountered that name from people literally telling me over 10 times. And the name was Aurora. I was like, wait a minute, my name, my soul name is how I was shown a few years back when I had that reconnection, was Aurea. And it didn't start making sense up until the point when Spirit always reclaims, now you need to know, you know, now it's when you're giving this in a bigger picture. Because even those of us who are meant to share this knowledge, we're not going to always have it in its full essence. We're going to get pieces and pieces up until the point that it's needed to be a certain way. That's how it goes. We never reveal the whole story. If it's not meant to serve that way, then it won't be revealed. That's what I'm saying. So we're getting things in the way that it's needed for the greater whole. So when I've heard those names, I was like, okay, interesting. So many people having that come to them, and it didn't make sense yet. But when this information started pouring through, and I've read the material from Sal years ago, But how you really know it's your time to integrate that is when you forget about it, when you put your readings, when you put your triggers and awakenings aside. But when your time comes, your soul gives you the messages in your own form, but then you relate back and you're like, wait a minute, I read this, oh my gosh, you know. And that's how you know it's coming from you. That's how you know it's coming through your own soul, through your own extension. Let's call it like that. So I wish to give this as an example that you understand what the message will be about a little further. And if you resonate with the frequency Aurora, which a lot of people are, this is just this group, and I'm showing this is this group complex that is very much drawn to what I share because it has a specific encoding that's meant specifically to awaken and call back to the true love essence of that soul, because they are extensions of this oversoul group. It will make sense to those of you who know, and a lot of you already have received this, and I've had people share this with me, and I'm like, wait a minute, it's interesting because a lot of these people sometimes, they even have similar traits, you know, with the elven, with the fairy resonance, and all of that, with the nature, natural principles, and it started to make more and more sense to me as this was being revealed, as when I was also being shown more about this. So I want to step aside now and bring through this message of what this being serving as a parent soul and deliver it through very simplistic language of spirit. Dear beloveds, before we begin this sharing and a conscious knowing, we would like to show a very simple exercise for everyone in order to increase our spirit flame, which will increase our own spirit connection and knowing, so that whatever we receive, whether it be coming from the inside or outside, comes through the integrity of our inner knowing. So the exercise is very simple. It's a basic meditation exercise where you sit in a lotus position, or a position where your back is held straight. And what you start doing is you start pushing the white sacred flame from the bottom of your first chakra and your root on this physical plane of existence. And with your in-breath, you start imagining that this sacred white flame, you see it like a burning, igniting flame. With your breath, you're pulling it upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards, so it extends and expands like a column of white light. Once it reaches the point where it's ready to exit through your crown and enter into the realms higher than what you can physically experience, you start actually holding your breath for a while longer, and as you release that sacred flame, you imagine it goes out, it spreads like sprinkles of light, diamond shining light, and not only it feeds your luminescent, radiant light body form, your Ka, but it actually also feeds and goes out as extensions of that source when you're actually serving all of life through your own building of that sacred white fire within. So again, with that in-breath, imagine that fire starting to rise up. You're like drawing it forth, you're drawing it up, holding your breath at the crown and releasing. And imagine it goes out in the shape of the infinity symbol, a spreading toroidal field, illuminating your light radiant vessel, which is directly interconnected with your physical body. And with that spreading out evenly, you're always invoking and envisioning that your physical body is a direct reflection of your inner radiant light, because this is what true illumination and radiance actually is. It's not just to be enlightened in the mind and connecting to spirit, but bringing through the aspect that we know as the creatrix into the physical human form. And that is what true ascension in terms of resurrection is all about. So when a soul is ready to truly start the program and the physical knowing of itself on the journey of ascension as resurrection, the soul will start to further bring in, through their own directive and their initiative, the everything that starts to mirror and reflect back all of its totalities as the soul is ready to kind of merge with greater and greater aspects of thyself. This is not just the same as many gurus have been practicing as they've been vertically connecting to their highest, maybe one of their higher or highest aspects, going straight up to that part, but never really doing the full embodiment work. So they haven't become illuminated in the physical body. So they've been channeling that, or there's also many different channelers that go out there in a different realm or reality of experience in a different energetic form, and they bring that forward to really truly ascend and physically resurrect through becoming acquainted and reacquainted with the true love spark, which is the spark of your own soul origin and the true source, which is not just the source of all, because in truth we are one, we are unified with all life in creation. But when we search the connection with source, we know that we're one with the greater source of all. But we cannot achieve that attainment, that resurrection, without connecting with that source, which is the source of our parent soul. The soul, the group soul complex that birthed the individual soul that became the persona that we now perceive ourselves to be. In this ascending process, what's required is the memory, the record memory for everything that's being laid out for that soul that wants to return in its own wholeness, that wants to return to the unified white flame. So as we start breathing this way, the unified white flame goes further and further up, and as we release it, it goes into a radiant light, luminescent form, and ready to re-enter back at the bottom in a beautiful shape. It almost creates this movement. This is a dynamic movement with both polarities as masculine divine, feminine divine merged as one, both in a luminescent white diamond flame. So, when this process begins, and when this process begins on higher levels, not just for the individual soul, but the group soul complex, what's occurring is that an initiative is sent straight through source, filtered down, descended down through the source of the parent of that group soul complex, and that the initiative is formed that a resonant magnetic field will become a physical incarnate that will serve as the direct mirror for those souls that belong to that specific group that's being called back to their ascending home. So when we're truly seeking to reconnect back with the true love, with a soulmate, with a twin flame, with a beloved, we're actually seeking the beloved in terms of our own celestial self. When such an initiative is taken, the prime source light holds and imprints within that a specific encoding of the entire, let's call it the entire oversoul group matrix, creatrix, of everything they've ever been through, experienced, learned, and processed and integrated through, goes into that fusion. And that fusion can become a physical incarnate if that is the decree of that soul, if truly is ready to resurrect, and these extensions of that soul wanting to come back again into the white fleet of unity within that soul complex. So what happens is that a representative as the parent soul, it's called in many terms the oversoul parent, starts the journey of becoming a physical being. That being is imprinted with all the knowledge of the oversoul, with all the understanding and the reflection that they can serve for all these beings. And that being then later in their physical seeming journey and mission can reflect that to each individual, but also to the group soul complex. So what they share, what they deliver will always be in the resonance of that group, because they are imprinted, they are seeded that way, and that's why they can also physically do the work of that seeding for others who do have that group belonging resonance. So imagine that parent of the soul, you can imagine it like a dot in the middle of the circle, and that dot is always in the middle, it's always within the knowing of the entire circle. So that parent soul comes, and being directly source imprinted, it carries all these light quotients, and that's why it has the knowledge that it can spread out for those fellow extensions of that group soul complex can remember as well. they can become invited in that process of divine remembrance. So as the parent soul shares that knowledge, other parts are remembering that they are part of this knowledge, they're part of this complex, they are returning home, which is actually the home to their overlighting soul presence, the greater luminary self, luminescent self of the entire group complex. The soul still remains an individualized soul, but because it's returning to that luminescent presence, it now has the ability to become luminescent, to become overlighted, to become illumined with that light. So as the souls within that complex are ready to start and initiate that process, are ready to become not just enlightened but illumined, this parent soul will be sent. There will be a direct mirror reflection, and almost having the vibration that they will literally be magnetized towards it, because it does have the proper magnetics that each member of that extension needs for their own evolution, their own divine remembrance, in its soul evolution and in the physical human self evolution, because they are blending together as one. So this recognition is held by a strong memory, a memory of that parent soul as being almost like a divine parent or a strong sibling, a divine brother and sister. The thing is that the human still has processing in the brain that makes them recognize things as brotherly, sisterly. It still categorizes at time, but the recognition within the soul extension returning to their true ascending illuminating presence is that they will feel strong affinity to that parent soul member, that it's actually a direct incarnate of that source imprinting. So they're, in a way, they're a program, they're a prototype, they are a mirror of that divinity of the whole oversoul. And that's why in many cases this being will feel so full of divine potency, so full of light. They'll be extremely intelligent, holding many multidimensional various capacities, because they already have the multidimensional capacities of the entire oversoul. So while the certain extending members still maybe particularly more resonate with certain specific stellar either origin or incarnations or specific memory, let's call it Pleiadian, Sirian, Lyran, Arcturian, while that soul parent incarnate, they hold the frequency of all, because they're simply imprinted with the codes of all, because they're merely a composite, a synthesizer of that which is of the group. And because of that, they have the strongest capacity to call back that group. Without that, the flame of the unified light cannot be as intense. The call that goes out to these ascending and extending soul composites cannot be that strong. And that is why when the decree is made, it comes directly through source initiative, and it goes out in its horizontal, descended physical embodiment, because that is the strongest way to pull that call. And when that reconnection and remembrance and resonance with the parent soul is established, it almost feels like an interlocking point. It feels like the individual that's being called back through that parent soul will have a strong knowing. They'll feel very pulled to that being. They will feel pulled. They will feel strong affiliation, association. It's almost like meeting back a part of themselves. The thing is that they're actually starting to remember who they are in its prime light, in its prime capacity. They're starting to be called back. They're returning to the true lumen love, that it's actually who they are. It's what birthed them. It's their own source self within their group soul. And that's why this affinity is so strong, because the love is what binds this process. The love is what created this process. So the remembrance also needs to flow through love. And there can almost be like this sense of falling in love with the being, with the incarnate. But actually the falling in love is always with the self. It's with the remembrance that the parent soul brings to those aspects that are remembering what they also truly are. Because they're ready to ascend. They're ready to regain their galactic memory, their true soul lineage, so they can move on to the next stage of their evolutionary journey, when later also they can start re-emerging and sharing and serving in a new light, in a new way. So this is actually a beautiful process, an initiative of divine love. So if you imagine the spirit, the straight divine father aspect, which sometimes we call the spirit connection, can only truly come into the physical incarnation through that creatrix imprint. So imagine the light descending into a physical bowl, a vessel that can hold that, and that incarnate, that direct incarnate needs to be as that vessel for so much of that light. So they also need to have their physical body very strong. They need to have an imprinting of many hybrid DNA encoding, so they can actually hold the capacity for so many beings that are belonging to that group complex. And it is very important that this is happening, because with this call back, the soul extensions are remembering their prime home origin, and that they're remembering that that origin is actually returning to that parent group. And that means that's a space of consciousness. It's a space of regaining the totality of all of their luminescence, not just partial. And the ability to awaken to the fact that this can become a physical expression and manifestation of the Spirit's light made in form, made in flesh. So when the incarnate goes about their purpose, they need to become a direct representative embodiment of that, because through that way showing, other extensions are remembering and embodying that as well. Because the true teaching is embodying, it's showing the way, it's paving the way, and calling back. So when the call is of love, it's in everything. It's imprinted within the voice. There will be a recognition through the voice, through the hand gestures, through the energy feel around. The recognition would always come through love. And when that recognition is interlocked, the process of that ascending being who is remembering their extension and being called back to a greater soul complex, the initiative begins, and their process, it's an alchemical marriage in a way, begins. So this is what's taking place now for many beings. There's a few of those parent incarnates that are calling their own members of the groups that are ascending, and each is doing in their own way. Each grouping will have its own unique process, but the mechanical process of physical ascension as resurrection is always as it is, because it's a divine principle that extends through all life in creation as the universal laws within divine love of unity. They always exist as they are within all spaces, times, dimensions. All realities is one. So this message is a call out to those divine lovers who are knowing that their path begins and ends with physical ascension, with the knowledge of who they truly are as initiates of divine love, that it's divine love that's calling them back. And that's the love that creates the call, that creates the interlocking, which starts the ignition of the mechanical physical, human to human, spirit to human ascension process in terms of embodying it here on earth at this time, and carrying forth this knowledge then as the extensions go further out and serve those that are still ascending. And this is how this is being done. So imagine a beautiful divine structure that's a divine hierarchy, but in a way it's more like a divine ordering, where everything in spirit is always within its own timing, within its own direct divine perfection, position. Everything is laid out, everything is mapped out to that perfection. But the human parts don't always understand that, and that is why they can get confused. So we have to listen to the resonance of the heart, which speaks through the law of divine love. So the love is that which truly creates the calling, so which is that push and pull. The magnetics is what creates that to truly be as what it is. So be it, and so it is for many of you beautiful ones, awakening to your true nature, awakening back to the truth of divine love, that the love is true, that love always was everything that was behind every single thing in all of life and creation, so that the creatrix part now is becoming more evident, because without this creatrix part there would be no such thing as the world we know it. And through the creatrix part, the souls are also being called back home, not just through memory that we call it's the spirit, it's the higher self, but it can be in creation. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. So much love to all. So I hope you like that. I hope it resonated with you. It truly left a mark in my heart today. And I would also like to say that if you want to go deeper into the group soul complex and consciousness, I also have a course. It's called the group Soul Consciousness and Enlightened Partnership, because it does talk about this illumination in the physical. You can check that out on my webpage, Set Up Being a Light. I have many other services available as well. And that's it for now. Thank you for sharing your feedback and love with me. It's always welcome, because it means a lot for me to have your expressions, because you are my life. We are alive in creation, and I love every single one of you who truly feel called to the resonance of the home frequency that I came here to do. As in the mission that you've seen is a strong mission of mine, and it's a clear knowing now. And that's why I do what I do with such devotion, because it's a calling and it's coming directly from, you know, the big guy. So the thing is that if you feel anything that resonates with you, just take that in. If it doesn't, leave it, because then it's not for now. Or it's going and seeding, and it's going to return when it's time, because everything is always for us to hear or to integrate in its own divine timing. So have a beautiful time. I hope your full moon and solstice ritual and ceremony was beautiful, because it did really leave a strong imprint on all of us. And we will continue to embody this new wave through entire summer. Well, it's summer here in the northern hemisphere in Europe. But yeah, that's it for now. There will be more coming, and stay tuned, because the divine reunion and the preparation for that will come soon. And yeah, I think that's it. I think I've said and shared everything I needed to. Go check my webpage. There's a lot shared there, and there's many messages. You can also check other messages from Holy Spirit I have there, basic, simple messages, because sometimes as humans we want everything complex. If something is simple, we don't believe it. We rather have it all mentally complex, but in truth, it really is that simple. It all comes down to that white flame of unity, and that means unity with your soul group. We can't be everywhere and attuned to everything. The unity is also in that diversity and the uniqueness through which all souls were created. So we have to find the uniqueness in that unity too. That's the path to unity. So thank you for checking out my work, and I love you all so very much. With love, wisdom, and power, take care, and I'll talk to you again soon.